Welcome back to week number 4 of Remember I Am, our series on the 4 yogas. So we've made it to our final week, and after building a strong foundation with the previous 3 yogas, we're now ready to take the most direct path of them all, the path of Jnana Yoga. Now, the word jnana means knowledge, but this does not refer to an intellectual knowledge. Rather, it refers to that innate inner knowledge of the self, which resides within all living beings. Now, traditional Jnana Yoga is a path of renunciation and negation, and it relies heavily on study of the Advaita Vedanta scriptures. Jnana Yoga essentially seeks to destroy the veil of Maya and achieve liberation through total renunciation of duality. However, the great Indian sage Sri Ramana Maharshi revolutionized Jnana Yoga through his teachings on the direct path to realization, which he called SelfInquiry. The practice of self-inquiry is so sharp and direct that it requires no study of the Vedas, the Gitas, the Sutras, the Upanishads, or any ancient scriptures. It requires no negation of the mind or the body, but it relies simply upon the knowledge, I am, and one's attention upon that knowledge. It is a path that literally anyone from any background can take up immediately, because all that's required is for one to meditate upon and inquire into that intimate, familiar sense of I, which all of us possess. So this will be our path of Jnana Yoga that we'll be covering this week, the practice of self-inquiry. Ramana Maharshi was also clear that all spiritual seekers arrive to this practice at different levels, and he made this distinction through the analogy of gunpowder. Some devotees, he said, are like gravel. No matter how many sparks you throw on them, they're just not able to ignite yet. Other devotees are more like charcoal. If you hold them under the fire for long enough, they will eventually ignite into flames. And some rare devotees are like gunpowder, where just the tiniest spark can completely ignite them into self-realization. And so what this analogy is really speaking to is the different levels of karma that every seeker may inherit from previous lifetimes when coming into this practice. What we believe that we see as an objective external world is truly just a dualistic thought. It is a creation of the mind. There is only the one infinite, eternal omnipresence, the all-pervading reality, which Advaita refers to as the self. When the sense of self becomes all-pervasive, then suddenly a separate external world that we seemed to have experienced before suddenly vanishes. This dualistic thought, which creates a seemingly separate, independent world, is what Ramana Maharshi called the I thought. And in order to understand the practice of self-inquiry, we need to have a good grasp of what the I thought is. So, firstly, within all living beings is the innate, ungiven knowledge, I exist, or I am, or simply, I. This feeling of I is the way that consciousness announces itself in physicality. Or, put another way, consciousness is experiencing itself through the feeling of I, the subject, the observer, the witness. But the ego is constantly borrowing this sense of I and attaching it to objects. I am this, I am that. And the first object that the ego attaches the sense of I to is the body. I am this body, I am this person, I am thinking thoughts, I am doing actions. This is the ego. And so, as we've said in this series, there is no independent self doing its own actions or thinking its own thoughts. there is just the I thought in action, claiming all of the automatic happenings of the flow of life for itself. And this is how the ego pretends to be real. So by watching this I thought relentlessly and investigating it deeply, it begins to run out of hiding places. It becomes less and less sticky, and it loses the ability to convince you of its supposed reality. So let's take a deeper look into this technique and see why it is so effective at leading one to true self-knowledge. There is no isolated entity which is carried from experience to experience. In the same way that the apple is a product of the apple tree, the I thought is totally a product of its environment. So Ramana Maharshi proposed the practice of self-inquiry, which is to begin questioning the I, becoming skeptical about what it claims, and to try and find its source. The true I is not apparent when the false I is parading itself around through different forms. So by watching this I thought and finding its source, the false I will disappear. As a spark proceeds from a fire, so the sense of individuality proceeds out from the one absolute self. So by meditating upon the inner feeling of I long enough, one becomes so intimate and familiar with the I am knowledge that at some point the question will arise spontaneously. What is this I? Or more directly, who am I? The more one witnesses the pure knowledge I am shining within them, the more it becomes realized as an object. The I am is like a mirror that reflects the light of the sun, and self-inquiry allows you to see, through direct experience, that you are the sunlight, not the mirror. You are not the I, but the source of the I. Even that most intimate, familiar sense of I is still an object in awareness, because it can be perceived. What is perceiving the I? You are earlier than even the sense I am. You are the very source from which the I rises. In deep sleep, there is no sense of I, because it merges back with the source. But upon waking, the I am rises again. This is because the source is dreaming all of creation, and it has no experience of itself outside of the manifest universe. You are that source, dreaming of itself through the intimate feeling of I. Self-inquiry is the practice of meditating unceasingly upon that inner feeling of I, until the ego can no longer attach it to sense objects, and eventually it returns to its source and remains there. When the sense of I remains in its source and no longer rises, all duality vanishes, and everything is experienced as the self, the non-dual actuality, out of which everything arises, even that sacred, unborn knowledge, I am. So, as you can see, although this is the most direct practice available for self-realization, it is not one that can be done ritually or mechanically. Merely repeating the question to yourself, who am I, ad nauseum, will not provide any progress. It must be born of deep curiosity, from an insatiable desire to know who I truly am. The question, who am I, happens as a result of a direct in-seeing. What in-seeing? The inner revelation that even the sense of I is still an object that can be perceived. So if I can perceive even the sense of I, then I must be something beyond it. Therefore, who am I? These kinds of insights are not concepts that can be grasped intellectually. This revelation only comes about by meditating upon the feeling of I constantly. And Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj also advocated this as his primary spiritual practice. When he was asked how he became self-realized as the all-pervading self, he said that his guru told him, "You are the supreme reality. To know this, simply hold on to the sense of I am tenaciously, until the conviction of this fact becomes absolute." And Maharaj said that he realized the self after just 3 years of doing this practice relentlessly. Now, making yourself do a spiritual practice like this for 3 years sounds like an insurmountable task to the ego. But this practice truly gains a momentum of its own as you continue to meditate upon the inner feeling of I. It grows more self-shining and self-luminous, and it becomes effortless to remember I am. You simply aren't able to forget it. It becomes impossible to truly give your attention to anything else, because the feeling of I slowly becomes the only thing that actually feels real to you any longer. The cares and concerns of the external world just begin to fade and grow dim in the light of that beautiful truth shining within your heart. And so, until one achieves the I am state, realization of the absolute is not possible. You cannot expect to hit a home run before you've even learned how to swing a baseball bat. So both Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta advocated this ceaseless meditation upon the inner feeling of I. But where Ramana's teaching takes this practice a step further is to look out for the question, who am I, to arise in response to the I am state. When the feeling of I moves away from being personal to universal, slowly the entire world becomes experienced directly as the self. So as the I am state becomes solidified, it becomes experienced that even the I must have a source. And intuitively, it is known, I cannot be other than that source. And then the question, who am I, will begin to appear. This question will take the I back to its source in the very center of your being and let it abide there and never arise again to attach itself to an object. And this is because the feeling of I can truly only arise in response to some kind of perceived duality, when all there is the one absolute reality. Where is the need to say I? If the ego asks the question, who am I, looking to get some results out of it, it will only perpetuate the personal I. So instead of forcing this question to happen, just continue removing the I from everything the ego tries to attach to it. Just keep getting rid of the I thought by keeping your awareness on the inner feeling of I. Because when the feeling of I is not watched, it remains in the shadows of ignorance, where the ego can steal it away and use it for its own purposes. But when one keeps their awareness upon the I, it always remains under the spotlight, where the ego cannot steal it away without being caught in the act. So Ramana Maharshi called this self-attention. And because this is a very subtle practice that does take time to master, it's helpful to know some of the signposts that you're making progress along this path. One of the first signs of progress is that the questioning of the false I will begin to happen quicker and quicker as awareness starts to act like a bodyguard over the mind. No intruders allowed. And when this practice takes on its own momentum, self-inquiry will be going on all of the time. For example, a story appears in the mind, "Why did he do that to me?" And immediately something responds, "Me who?" Who is this fictional story character claiming to be the I? It will be seen immediately to be the ego, parading itself as the I, and then it just drops away. Another sign of progress is the increasing absence of unwanted thoughts over time. The mind begins to grow quieter and quieter, and a strong, crystallized awareness of the present moment continues to grow. And the final sign of progress is an increased appetite for silence. You will find yourself abiding more and more in the self, simply wanting to ignore the mind and just be as you are. Thoughts may go on, but you are unconcerned with them. Something in you begins to remember the deliciousness of presence and stillness, and it more and more becomes your natural default state of being. So your mantra for this week is, "Who am I?" But as we've stated in this video, it is not to be used as the mantras from the previous 3 weeks. It is not to be repeated ad nauseum, but I want you to use it as a weapon of defense against every attempt of the ego to attach the I to an object. I am this person, I am this body, I am doing this, I am thinking that, I am angry, I am upset. And you just begin to question it. Is the shining, self-luminous knowledge I am truly angry? Or is the ego angry and it's claiming the I to be angry instead? Who am I? Allow the I to continually remain a mystery, because that is where the power of self-inquiry truly happens. Now, as I stated in the opening video, this 4-week series was designed to give you a free sample of my 8-week masterclass, which takes all of these teachings and practices to a much deeper level. So if this series has sparked something in you, an excitement or a desire to go deeper, then we'll have the link available for you in the show notes to book a discovery call to learn more about the course and help us decide if it's the right fit for you. And you can also read hundreds of testimonials and reviews from other people who've taken this course already. As with any practice or course, this is not a quick fix or a shortcut, but this masterclass asks you to do real intensive work for a full 8 weeks. So for that reason, we only accept a portion of the applications that we receive. We have really strived to build a community of passionate spiritual seekers who are all in devotion to their spiritual growth. So if you believe that's you, my team and I would love to speak with you. And if you don't feel you're at that place yet, that's just as fine as well. The masterclass will always be available if and when you're ready for it. And in the meantime, you can continue to consume all of this free content. So in conclusion for your practice this week, remember that in order for self-inquiry to truly be successful, it must go on of its own accord, based upon your desire for realization. You must want freedom from the false I. If you know that there's a burglar in your home, will you really be content to just leave him there, or would you drive him out? Self-inquiry drives out the burglar in your home, otherwise known as the I thought. So question the false I this week, like a prosecuting attorney questioning a criminal on the witness stand. This is the essence of self-inquiry. Question the false and abide as the true. You are the one true self, from which and to which the entire world appears. And so the false I says, I am here because there is a world. The true I says, the world is there because I am.